Right, good afternoon, everyone. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Roy Sorales. I'm the chair of the Planning Committee. And on behalf of myself and the Vice Chair, Councillor Liz Aldworth, I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the Planning Committee being held today on Wednesday, the 23rd of March, 2022. The meeting is being held remotely via Microsoft Teams due to the restrictions in relation to COVID-19. This meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and audio of those individuals present and or speaking at Planning Committee will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. Due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19, Planning Committee site meetings have been suspended, and this meeting will not be open to the press and general public. However, interested parties may make a request to attend remotely and speak in regard to any item on this agenda. Votes for this meeting will be taken by Microsoft Forms, and when a vote is required, the form will appear, and then members will be asked to click on the yes, no, or abstain, and then click on the submit vote button. I will now carry out a roll call for attendance. Please can you confirm yourself as present when I call out your name? Councillor Adams.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Aldworth.
Present, Chair.
I have an apology from Councillor Andrews and Councillor Bevan. Councillor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Dix. Councillor Dix. Did I hear a voice then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fussell.
Emma.
Thank you. Councillor Goff.
Present.
Councillor Harding.
Present.
I have an apology from Councillor Higgs. Councillor Hussey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Ridgewell.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Simmons.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Present.
And myself, that's Councillor Sorales. We have 13 members present. And 3 apologies. That's Councillor Andrews, Councillor Bevan and Councillor Higgs. Now we move on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. If you have a declaration to make, could you please put your hand up now? There are no declarations. Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the first application before us tonight. This is application number 22/0046, and it's a change of use, 25 Cedar Road, Trinant, Newport. And the case officer is Mr. Mike Jones. Mr. Jones, would you give your presentation on this application now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Bear with me for a second. Can you see the presentation on the screen, Chair?
Yes, it's there.
Thank you. This application seeks full planning permission for a change of use from what is described in the application as a 3-bedroom single dwelling house to use as a 4-bedroomed house in multiple occupation. The property, number 25 Cedar Road, is shown edged red on the location plan. It's a modern property located in the southern side of Cedar Road, situated below the level of the highway. It's located in an established residential area within the settlement boundaries. and as such it is acceptable in principle, conforming to the requirements of policy CW15 general locational constraints and SP5 settlement boundaries. The property was previously the subject of a similar application in 2021 when this was subsequently withdrawn by the applicant. Where it was possible to do so, notification letters in respect of this application were sent to those who had commented on the previous application. Notification letters were sent to immediately adjoining properties and a site notice was displayed outside the property. 5 individual responses have been received, together with a petition bearing 88 signatures. The issues raised and the considered response to those concerns are set out in the report at page 3 of the agenda. This application relates to a change of use only from use as a single dwelling house, which is a C3 use, to use as a house in multiple occupation, a C4 use. The footprint of the building will not change and there are no external alterations to the fabric of the building. There is an existing raised parking area within the front curtilage of the dwelling, measuring 4.9 metres by 5.95 metres. To facilitate the change of use, the proposed plans indicate that the living room on the ground floor to the front of the house will become letting bedroom 1. The kitchen, dining room to the rear of the house will remain as such. Letting bedroom 2 and letting bedroom 3 are on the first floor with the existing family bathroom. Letting bedroom 4 will be in the existing room created in the roof space. Works for the maintenance, improvement or other alteration of any building which only affects the interior of a building does not involve development as defined by the Planning Act 1990 as amended. Therefore, when the conversion of the loft and the installation of the stairs were originally undertaken, planning permission would not have been required for these works. The application has been considered in accordance with national planning policy and guidance, local plan policy and supplementary planning guidance. In that regard, Planning Policy Wales acknowledges that there must be sufficient sites suitable for a full range of housing types to address the identified needs of communities. There is currently a shortfall of this type property in the borough, and as a result, heavy reliance is placed on bed and breakfast accommodation. It is considered that the proposal would meet the needs of the community in line with Planning Policy Wales. The Welsh Government published a practice note on houses in multiple occupation in 2017, which advised that HMOs provide a source of accommodation for certain groups, including students and individuals and/or small households unable to afford self-contained accommodation. The guidance acknowledges that in certain circumstances, this type of use can have an impact upon the wider neighbourhood, particularly where there are high concentrations of such properties. Research which suggests that a figure of 10% represents a tipping point beyond which a concentration of HMOs in a particular area may start to impact the character and balance of the community. I'm advised that in Trinant there are no licensable HMOs, and in Caerphilly County Borough as a whole, there are in a region of 200 unlicensed HMOs spread throughout the area. On that basis, the local planning authority is not in a position to argue that there is a high concentration of HMOs in the immediate vicinity of the application site or within the county borough as a whole. Policy C2 of the local development plan considers amenities and states a development proposal should ensure that there are no unacceptable impacts on the amenity of adjacent properties or land. On the basis that there are no external alterations, it is considered that the proposal would not give rise to any adverse visual impacts to the character and appearance of the surrounding area, nor would it give rise to any loss of privacy or be overbearing. Taking into consideration the cumulative impact of such HMOs within the borough and their dispersed placement, it is not considered that the proposed use in itself would significantly change the immediate character of the area or detrimentally impact current levels of amenity received by neighbouring occupiers. Accordingly, it is considered that the proposal complies with CW2 of the LDP. In that regard, the Head of Public Protection has raised no objections to the proposal. With regard to policy CW3, design considerations highway, the transportation engineering manager has no objections to the proposal, subject to the imposition of conditions requiring that the existing hard standing to the front of the shop property should be maintained free of obstruction for the parking of vehicles only. In conclusion, it's considered that the proposal complies with policy CW2 and CW3 of the County Borough Local Development Plan up to 2021, adopted November 2010, and as such it is acceptable in planning terms, and therefore it is recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in the report in respect of 25 Cedar Road, Trinant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you for your presentation. We now move on to the presentations from the Objector, Councillor Thomas, and then the agent. But I see Councillor Julian Simmons' hand is up. I mean, if it's relating to any questions on this development, obviously that will take place after the rest of the presentations have been given to us. If it's another matter, Councillor Simmons, and you think it's urgent enough, then I will bring you in, or will you lower your hand?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quickie. I do know the applicant, and only in the respect that he has an HMO in the village. I've been trying to connect through with the hands up and haven't been able to. So sorry if it's a bit hit and miss, but I am known to Mr. Pistachio, who is the developer. All right, but as I said, only in the respect that he has an HMO in Crosskeys here. Okay.
Are you seeking? Yeah. Are you seeking any advice on that?
Well, yeah, yes, please. Yeah, yes, I am.
Then could I ask Mr. Tranter if he's there? Mr.
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Simmons. So this really is your call. The test I suggest is whether or not this gentleman is a close personal associate to you. By the sound of it, this gentleman is an acquaintance of yours in that he has a similar property within Crosskeys.
That's correct.
That's the sort of test you need to weigh up. If he is just an acquaintance, I would suggest you don't need to declare an interest, and you are quite at liberty to remain in the meeting and vote on the application. But as I say, it is a matter for you. If you'd like to ask me anything else, then please go ahead.
No,
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. That's fine. I just thought I'd better make that known just in case, but that's fine. Thank you very much, both of you.
Okay, so I assume then, Councillor Simmons, that you'll be remaining in the meeting, yes?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, then in that case, then we move on to the presentations, and the first presentation as part of the objections to this development comes from Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thomas, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes to make a presentation. If you're extending towards the limit of your time, I'll let you know. But as soon as you start, I'll start the clock. Okay, so you can start whenever you wish.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, officers and fellow members. I'm here today to object to planning application 220046 COU. 25 Cedar Road, Trinant, for the following reasons. The above application sits in a dead-end street with very limited parking. Yes, I understand that the driveway for 2 cars has been built, but this will not be suffice for a property that could potentially house 3 or more people. This would cause a problem for the residents, as parking is already a contentious issue due to lack of car parking spaces. Highway safety for the residents is then also a concern. Depending on the residents that could possibly live at such a development, this could potentially lead to antisocial behaviour. The sustainability is totally inapt for a proposed HMO in the lack of community facilities. Should people who choose to live in the proposed HMO need access to amenities, which gives them the chance to prosper and eventually move on to their home, Trinant Village is unable to provide this. Good public links is the only way this could be achieved. The village of Trinant in my opinion, is quite rural. Location with a limited travel opportunities. It had one road enter from the Kendon Hill and another from the other side of the village at Cumnant. Both roads are without pavements for pedestrians who makes walking in and out of the village unsafe. Because of where Trinant is situated, these links are particularly poor. Currently, the buses are limited throughout the day and night. The nearest train station is Newbridge, 2.4 miles away, Llanilla, 3.3 miles away. The village has one shop, no library for access to learning, no post office, and no doctor's surgery. As a ward member, I received many calls and requests from residents within the village inquiring if there are any council houses available. This application would lead to less houses for families from Trinant. If this application is passed, a precedent would set for more houses would be unavailable for local families. A petition has been signed by many local residents opposing this application as they feel strongly that yes, there may be a place for HMO development, but Trinant unfortunately is not one of them. I therefore request that the Planning Committee refuse this application on the grounds of highway safety, poor public links, limited travel opportunities and lack of houses already available to families. I'll finish with a reminder that a sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of existing communities and future generations to meet their own needs. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to express my concerns on behalf of the residents in Trinant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. We now move on to the agent, Mr. Pestitio, I believe is the pronunciation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. My name's Gary Pasticcio. Pleased to meet you.
Thank you very much. Well, I understand that you only have an audio connection. You're not on a video connection at all. You have 5 minutes to make your presentation. You start whenever you wish. I will be timing you, and just before the end of your presentation, about 15 seconds from the end, I'll give you a reminder to wind up if you are still talking at that time. Okay. Thank you very much. You can start whenever you wish.
Thank you.
I would like to thank the Caerphilly County Borough Planners for their role in determining this application. I am pleased with their conclusion that this application has been assessed and deemed to support approved planning policy and is recommended for approval. There is a severe shortage of this type of accommodation with the Caerphilly Borough County Council in respect of housing delivery. The National Planning Guidance Document, Planning Policy Wales, PPW, acknowledges that there must be sufficient sites suitable for the full range of housing types to address the identified needs of communities. Paragraph 4.2.11. On the 24th of February 2022, the Welsh Assembly policy Future Housing was released. It states, variety of housing to ensure places are socially mixed and cater for a varied lifestyles. They should have a mix of housing types and tenors and space that allows for home working, urban growth and regeneration that should cater for families, couples and single people of different ages, as well as providing a mix of affordable and private housing. These descriptions include HMOs, which there is a severe shortage in this area. I would like to make it clear that I had considered making this accommodation available to Caerphilly Quays. However, due to Welsh Assembly policy changes, this type of property is no longer able to be used by them for or other similar organisations. Organisations such as Caerphilly Quays are able, without any consent, to accommodate vulnerable people in self-contained units. This could be a house, this could be any house, but it can't be 25 Cedar Road because the HMO status would prevent it. The property would be let to private working contractors and also first-time renters in the local area. I have read and understand the objectors' concerns. This is a small, manageable HMO. I understand my responsibilities as a landlord and will use my experience to ensure that this house will be managed correctly. I would like to make it clear that the attic room is lawful. The concentration of HMOs in the Trinant area is probably too small and restricts people's choice of accommodation. This can lead to them moving away from their families. When I was young, it wasn't uncommon for a friend's first flight from the family nest to be a share, and a share with a house of friends. Nowadays, that path to future life development would require those friends to live in a HMO. HMOs quite rightly require licensing. I strongly support the additional regulations that are imposed on HMOs. This will be a licensed HMO. Caerphilly Borough County Council have already conducted a suitability assessment and approved its use subject to change of use. Members of the Caerphilly Council are aware that I rent properties and I take that role seriously and professionally. Thank you once again, and I thank you for determining that this application is acceptable and that approval has been recommended by your planning officers. I hope that the members of this committee support the planner's conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pastetio. We now move on to the debate on this item, and I see first of all that Councillor Dix has got his hand up and Councillor Davis to follow. Okay, Councillor Dix.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yet again, here we are looking at a HMO, and the real concerns of the people out there are the occupants of the HMO, potential issues, antisocial behaviour, etc. As I said over and over again, I've been working in my job for the last 11 years with people in HMOs and visit them quite often, and I think I got more experience than anybody sat on that committee today. I know that they're a lucrative business opportunity for property owners. The thing that I find is that HMOs are usually cited because a house becomes available and it's not particularly the best location. It's just because a house has become available. The business opportunity is there, it's taken, they've got other properties, the people that the gentleman just spoke earlier, they then buy another house, they then draw down more benefits, more people into that, and they go on, that's their business plan. But like I said, it'd be nice if officers actually spoke to some of the people in Newport, officers who've been doing it for years, because the location is paramount to the success of an HMO. Like councillor, I can't remember the councillor's name who spoke earlier, but he's quite right to say this is an isolated area. So it's not just about having an HMO anywhere, it's about the location. And I've seen far too often where locations in my job have not been suitable, and those HMOs have failed over and over again. But it doesn't stop other HMOs popping up around the place. And HMOs 10% density is 1 in every 100 properties, which I think is a huge figure, because once you start HMOs in an area, usually people move out and then other HMOs start to buy in because the properties are available. So you get into this downward spiral. These are just my observations on this, but I have got concerns about the location, and I have got concerns about the law not really dealing with a HMO effectively as they should do, to make sure that number one, it's in a good location, and number two, that real concerns about occupants, because you are putting individuals who don't know each other, who have no family, who have no connection, they're complete strangers. You have a house of 5 or 6 people and you can end up with arguments or fights, never mind 5 or 6 individuals who just happen to be placed in a HMO, maximum occupation, without any prior relationship, knowledge or friendship, and that can be quite challenging in itself. So they're my concerns on that subject, really.
Thank you, Councillor Dix. Councillor Mike Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. While I appreciate that HMOs are okay in the right place, And I am aware, of course, that many, if not all, the HMO applications within the past 4 years have been granted. I'm also aware that there are not many planning grounds to refuse such applications as these. However, I would like to bring to your attention that this application is in Trainant, which I think could be classed as a rural village, which is set away from other communities. I know from my own casework that young parents brought up in Trainant cannot get housing within this community. And bear in mind that the Welsh Government have been quite vocal in that we should look after such communities, and bear in mind that such communities very often need family support. I am to understand that there is a family living in this property at the moment, and I don't think there would be any problem having another family there, moving in there, should the residents there decide to leave. In reality, I think this application for an HMO in Trainant is purely to maximise profit. I would like to move that we refuse this application, and like I say, there's not many grounds that we can, but I would like to move that we refuse this application on the lack of need for development, and mainly the loss of a family home. Should we decide not to refuse this application, then I think we could be setting a precedent in the wrong direction here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. You've moved a motion that we refuse. Is that seconded before we continue? Okay, then that actually.
Yeah, I'll second it, Chair. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll second it. Councillor Dixon.
So it has been seconded. Okay, we'll move on to the other members that wish to contribute to the debate. Councillor Mike Adams and then Councillor Ridgewell.
Thank you, Chair. The questions in the main for the officer, Mike Jones, regarding the size of the property. I'll come on to the location as we've noted. This was originally shown as a 2-bedroom property, but as quite a while ago changed to using the attic space to make it 2-bedroom. Are the other properties in this street, Mike, also or still 2-bedroom in the main? That's just one question, Chair.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't have that information.
Okay, because having a 2-space car park at the front would certainly probably be unusual for that street. Other members could probably mention whether that's right or not. So now going from what apparently was originally a 2-bedroom now to a 4-bedroom property, is the house itself big enough really to house four adults in that way? So that's a wonder of mine. Then also from Mr. Pistachio's presentation, he mentioned a couple of times that it will be a licensed HMO. In your report, we mentioned that there are something like 200 unlicensed HMOs in Caerphilly at the moment. How can we determine that we have so many unlicensed ones when we are looking for applicants to actually state how they declare their HMO to be when they taking that into account? And he's already mentioned that Caerphilly Keys won't be involved, so it will be in effect professional contractors, people who are already working and not homeless perhaps where they live. It's just because that perhaps they're moving into the area and need single accommodation. The number of questions like that, and might suggest that they really will have their own transport to go back and forth for their job. A number of things there, rather than rely on the very sparse public transport that I know to be very rare in Trinant as well. I don't know whether you can answer many of those questions.
I'll try and answer some of those questions, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Okay, thanks, Carwyn.
In terms of the size of the property, clearly we've looked at that in assessing the application, and whilst we as a planning authority don't have minimum standards for accommodation, we still have to consider whether the amenity of occupiers of a property have an acceptable amenity space and living space within a property, and whether there's outlook from windows, etc., etc. And in that regard, it's considered to be acceptable, the proposal. So that's the first question. In terms of the car parking on the site, what you got here is a 2-bedroom property which was extended to a 3-bedroom property with a loft conversion, which didn't require planning consent. As you say, it's unusually got 2 parking spaces there, and those 2 parking spaces currently serve a 3-bedroom property. If you go from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom property, there's no requirement to provide an extra car parking space. So in that regard here, because they're going from a 3 to a 4-bed, we cannot require an extra car parking space on this site. So that's the answer to that question. And sorry, I didn't make a note of your final question, which was in terms of
difference between up to 200 unlicensed properties as HMOs, whereas Mr. Pisticcio is saying this will be licensed. How do we manage that difference to us?
That information in terms of 200 unlicensed has come from officers in our housing department. I don't know how they've come by that figure, because clearly if they're unlicensed, then they don't have to register with the council, so we don't actually know the exact number. But they've done that on the basis of research they've done into sort of the types of properties that are available and sort of the need that's in the area. So it's a best guess figure, really, and that's all we can really offer because they're unlicensed. Yeah. And all they can really give us with any certainty is the number of licensed properties in an area. And in that regard, you know, in terms of this area, there are no licensed properties at this moment in time. So, you know, in terms of the guidance where, you know, the Welsh Government says there may be issues after 10%, well, we're at 0% at the moment. So we'd have difficulty arguing that there's going to be any impacts from this one. I note the comments from a number of members in terms of the location of the village and its sustainable credentials, and I have some sympathy for that view. It isn't well connected to the wider network. However, it's the same for every other occupier of any other property in the area. And I think, you know, whilst there may be some concerns in regard to that issue, I don't think they would be sufficient to justify refusing an application. We would have difficulty defending an appeal on that basis, and going to appeal and sort of convincing an inspector that there's an unacceptable impact on the potential occupiers of these properties. And it's to a certain extent, depending on who goes in there, it's a matter of personal choice as to whether they are happy to live in this area or not.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Carwyn.
Yeah, I had asked the question about the 200 unlicensed or not licensed properties of housing previously and had a similar answer. So we haven't moved forward. That's what I was hoping to get from you on this one. Thanks, Carwyn. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Right, we'll move on now to Councillor John Ridgewell, then Councillor Julian Simmons, and then finally I've got Councillor Fussell with his hand up as well. So Councillor Ridgewell first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I start by saying that I fully support the whole notions of HMOs. There is clearly a need across the whole of the county borough for these properties. There are lots of people who require this sort of accommodation, and I think we all recognise that's vitally important. And then the next point I want to make is that in terms of Planning Policy Wales, those of us that have been on the planning committee for some time now recognise that the guidance that we have is somewhat vague. It isn't definitive, it isn't clear, and it is tipped largely towards allowing these developments to take place, and find that there's good reason for that. And the last point I want to make before I come to my conclusion is that in terms of Mr. Pasticcio, I mean, he's an honest businessman. He has every right to develop these properties. I think it's fair to in any way imply we're demonizing the gentleman, you know, and making a profit is part of what they have to do. So that I don't have any issues with that. But ultimately, you know, we have to make a judgment on this, and this is where I think our role is so important, because we bring in common sense. And if you look at that little road, it's incredibly narrow. It's a cul-de-sac. You can see it's difficult to get cars down there. And the majority of the properties in there have been and remain probably 2-bedroom properties. The notion that sticking a 4-bedroom property, allowing the property at the end to become a 4-bedroom property, really doesn't make sense at all. And I'm very minded on this particular matter. I think the argument from the local member is very strong. And whilst I support in principle all of these things, I think we're in a situation where we really need to be reasonable on this and recognise that this is not a location for one of these particular properties. So my view is that we turn this one down. Regrettably, because as I say, there is a need for these, but location is critical, and I think many of my colleagues here tonight have said location is critical, and I completely support that. And although I don't know the road, I do know the road actually. I haven't been out there for many years, but I looked at it on Google Maps, you know, and quite frankly, it doesn't lend itself to this sort of development, in my view. And I appreciate Carwyn saying that it might be opposed, but I think from an elected member perspective, you know, we have to recognise the community that exists there and support that particular community in this instance. And so I'm opposed to it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Simmons.
Thanks, Chair. As I said in my earlier piece, that Mr. Pasticcio actually owns one of these HMOs in my village, and there have been concerns of sort of reading the paperwork of people's behaviour and what have you. I know this isn't prerequisite for planning, etc., but Mr. Pasticcio manages his properties very, very well, for what it's worth. I'm 90% in agreement with Councillor Ridgewell. I'm still uncertain about really the location myself, but I will be voting for it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Simmons. Councillor Fussell.
Thank you, Chair. It was a simple question, really, in relation to the matter of building regulations not being required. Fully understand that internal adaptations to a property aren't an issue, but it's just reading the report. There's nothing in there with regards to any. No planning consent was needed, but building regulations would have been needed. It's academic. The applicant probably would have gone through that on the purchase of the property, perhaps. But I'm just wondering, from the point of view of this report, should that not have been mentioned in there as to whether or not building regs were obtained in terms of the attic conversion? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fussell. I notice, Councillor Davis, your hand is up again, but if you do, you'll close the debate. So, because you've actually put a motion to the floor. If there's no other member that wishes to speak, then I can fetch you back in, Councillor Davis. And there isn't another indication. So, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to go back to Carwyn, if I may. He said he couldn't defend if we refuse it on the location. You know, and I understand that we can't take into the highways and things like that. But what I want to go to is what I said earlier is. Where he stands on the thoughts of the loss of a family home, because as I understand it, this is one of the refusals that can be listed in an argument against such HMOs.
Carwyn, would you like to respond to that?
I don't think it is a reason we could defend it. I think it's a material consideration for this type of application. I mean, I noticed Ryan shaking his head here. He's got more experience than I have in Swansea of HMOs in an area. It's a matter of a market choice as to what type of housing is in an area. And in terms of, as we've said, with regard to Planning Policy Wales, there's a need to provide a mixture of housing tenures and types within an area. So this development would feed into that and would be supported by national policy, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you, Cowen. Ryan, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on that point, I think clearly concerns have been raised about the loss of a family home. That's not something we can take into account when we decide on a planning application. We just considering the change of use. It's effectively just adding an extra bedroom. We can't consider the type of people are going to be occupying this property. So in material planning terms, that's all we're really considering is the increase in the number of bedrooms and what planning issues that creates. Now, concerns have been raised about car parking, but as Karen indicated earlier, the parking guidelines that we apply in determining plan applications would not dictate that we require additional car parking to serve this proposed development. So there's no basis upon which we can justify a refusal on car parking grounds applying those guidelines. So it leaves us in a very difficult position. I do understand members' concerns, but in pure material planning, when we consider in pure material planning issues, there are no real grounds upon which we could justify or defend an appeal in that respect. So I just need to be clear. I know that Councillor Davis has indicated, and it's been seconded, a reason for refusal in terms of its location, but that isn't, and the lack of need, that isn't a material planning issue.
Sorry, I said the refusal would be on the loss, lack of a family home.
Loss of the family home. That wouldn't be a material planning consideration, as has been indicated previously. We require to provide a range and choice of housing, and I'd be very surprised if there aren't individuals in every community and who require accommodation. So single people looking for somewhere to live. I think we all must know, children who are in their 20s, 30s, still having to live with their parents because they can't find accommodation. There is a housing crisis in the country. This type of accommodation provides for a clear need, a clear identified need within every community, I would suggest, but certainly across the country. So in planning terms, I think we've got no grounds in that respect.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Ridgewell's hand up, but effectively the debate has been closed. I gave everybody an opportunity to come in, but it was closed as a result of the final comments given by Councillor Davis. So really, at this stage, we have to move to the vote. Obviously, it is one of those situations where people are very sympathetic towards the problems that they can possibly foresee with developments of this kind, but we in planning terms, my own view is that we have very little choice other than to accept it, and accept it with some regrets. But there we are. Okay, so it's going to the vote, and as a result of that, I will ask for the voting slip to be put forward, and it's those yes will be for the proposal put forward by Councillor Davis that we refuse the application. No will be effectively, it's a yes or no situation where if you vote no, you are effectively voting in favour of the application. So it's for or against, but it's in reverse, isn't it? So just to make that clear, if you vote for, you are voting for the proposal put forward by Councillor Davis, which is to refuse the application. If you vote no, you're voting in favour of the application. Okay, the voting slip is before you. Rebecca, when you are ready, can you give the result of the vote?
Chair, I'm just going to check to make sure the vote is in order. Just give me a moment, please. Thank you. Chair, the vote's in order. So that was 5 for the motion to refuse and 8 against the motion to refuse, Chair.
Okay, so the application has been granted. We now move on to agenda item 4, which is application number 21/1192, which is an outline planning application. It's land at grid reference 31808219795 Central Avenue to Groveside Road, Oakdale, which is the former comprehensive school site in Oakdale. The case officer is Justin Waite. Justin, can you make the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just seek to share my screen 1 second. Just bear with me, Chair. Just having a bit of an issue at the moment. I think I've got it. Just bear with me. Okay, can you all see the presentation on the screen?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, so this is an outline plan application for residential development on the former Oakdale school site in Oakdale. The proposal itself seeks to provide up to 99 units on the site, and also there'll be associated works in relation to that those 99 units. You'll see that it's an outline plan application, and all matters are reserved. So we're largely looking at the principle of whether the site can accommodate, obviously, a residential development up to this scale itself. In terms of the surrounding area, you'll see the application site shown with the red outline boundary here. You've got Penmine Estate just to the south here. We've got Oakdale Terrace running along the eastern boundary. There's an access, a small lane, the Rue, which runs just to the northeastern corner there. And just to the west of the site, the land slopes down to the B4251 road, which obviously runs there. In terms of the site layout, even though all matters are reserved, this is an indicative layout, so it does give you an idea of how the site could be developed. Some of what I would actually highlight here is, as you can see, you have a residential development in a largely residential area. It's a brownfield site. So in terms of land use, it's acceptable, and in principle, it's considered acceptable to develop this site for residential development. Some of the key aspects of the development itself, you have a primary vehicle access coming in off Oakdale Terrace into the site here on the eastern side of the application site. There is, and I'll show you some photos in a minute, there is a pedestrian crossing in the vicinity here, which would have to be relocated just to the north as a result of that access going in there. You'll note that the previous use of the site for a secondary school, there was a school car park on the site, and there was a vehicle access into the school car park. That access now is proposed to be utilised just as a pedestrian link into the site itself. And you also note here with the sort of pink purpley arrows here indicating how the site would also connect into not only the adjacent streets, but also some public rights of way which run along the sort of south-western boundary here, also the western boundary, and also to the north. So that it demonstrates there how the site would have good connectivity into the surrounding built environment. Within the site itself, you'll see that there's a group of trees here, so central corridor of trees which are looking to be retained. You can also see the significant trees around the perimeter of the site on the west and north. Those are also largely retained. You'll see that in the northwestern corner of the site, this is an area which is proposed for the water attenuation on the site, but also how it can be utilised for public amenity and so on. There's also a play area just here shown indicatively to show that the site can accommodate on-site play facilities. And you'll also see with this layout here that a considerable effort is being made to front the properties onto Penmine Estate and Oakdale Terrace to give a strong relationship then with the surrounding built environment. Just moving on to, this is just, again, it's an illustrative sketch, as obviously the detailed matters are coming to reserved matter stage, but this gives you an idea how the development could look as it fronts onto Oakdale Terrace at the front here, and Pen Mine Estate, which is just running just to the left-hand side of the sketch here. And obviously this is shown here as a sort of prominent corner building, you know, which addresses both the adjacent streets there. So this is just an idea of how the site could come forward at reserved matters stage. Just looking at some site photographs to give you a bit of context. This is just a view southwards along Oakdale Terrace. I don't know if you can imagine, but those sketches there, you would have the properties fronting onto the adjacent street there. This next photograph, this just gives you an indication of where the primary vehicle access would be, and obviously here you can also see the pedestrian crossing that would also need to be relocated to facilitate that vehicular access. You'll note from the report that I think 13 objections from members of the public came in, and some of those objections related to this access here into Pen Mine Estate, the difficulties residents currently have in turning right out of this estate. And you can also see a multi-use games area there, which has to be relocated as a result of the proposed development. And the proposal is to relocate the multi-use games area down to the Isloing High School site, which would allow obviously the residents of the ward to still benefit from this multi-use games area to serve them. Just in terms of this access and the impact on the highway, you'll note that the transport statement submitted with the application compared the proposed development against the previous use as a comprehensive school. And you'll see from that report that in terms of trips in the morning and trips overall throughout the day, two-way vehicular trips were significantly less for the proposed development in comparison to the previous use. There's a small increase at the peak PM period, I think of only 7 additional vehicular trips, two-way vehicular movements, and that relates to something like 1 movement every 9 minutes, which is considered to be acceptable. And the transportation engineering manager, you'll note, that has raised no objection to the proposed development on the efficient and safe use of the highway network. This photograph here just gives a brief view of the existing vehicle access going towards the former school car park, just to give an indication of how that would link to becoming a pedestrian link into the site there. This photograph gives a view westwards across the site. It gives you a good indication, I think, of the difference in levels on the site. You can see the Chartist Bridge there in the distance, and you can see also that from the previous demolition works of the school, where the ground has been disturbed as a result of that, and some material remaining on site. This view is looking eastwards, is from the bottom of the site, and again you can see the significant difference in levels. This photograph also picks up the group of trees that would be largely retained. It also shows a residential property, a Pen Mine Estate there just to the right-hand side. The next photograph, again, just give you some more context from within the site. This is looking northwards. This is looking towards the sort of the bottom left there. You can see the area where the water attenuation facility would be, and you can also there see the significant trees along the northern boundary, which would be retained as part of the proposal. Again, this is looking southwards now. You can pick up the existing school car park in the foreground there, and you can obviously see a number of properties from Pen Mine Estate there just in the distance. And this is just taken from another angle looking westwards, and you can see again these are 2 residential properties in Pen Mine Estate, and you note from the report that again, whilst the detailed matters are reserved for future consideration, that the site is considered to be capable of accommodating this residential development without adversely affecting the amenity of the surrounding residential properties. So overall, the site and the development is considered acceptable in principle for residential development up to 99 units. Obviously, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the relevant development plans and policies, the national policies and guidance also. And on page 26 of the report, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to a number of conditions. So I'll end the presentation there. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin. Right, my screen is actually not showing any hands up at the moment. I'm trying to find out. Right, okay, I've got Councillor Fussell with his hand up. Councillor Fussell.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate its outline application, Justin, and just a few questions in terms of this is Caerphilly Homes as an applicant, and whether or not at this juncture we have a policy with land that is owned, and this refers to the next application as well, actually, whether we apply the PV cell requirement on all properties that are suitably orientated for it. I appreciate the other elements I was going to ask about bats, roofs and boxes. That's all deferred for the actual main body report. But just wondering, is that now considered a fundamental requirement of properties built on land owned by the council still?
I mean, I'm not sure it being an actual, policy as such, but I can say in relation to this development, I know Caerphilly Homes are going for a high level of sustainable design, and they will be looking, I think, at sort of passive house principles and the utilisation of solar energy to to maximise that potential. So my understanding is, whilst these matters are reserved for future consideration, that they will be pushing for a far higher level of sustainable design and the use of renewable technology in the proposals, which would be, I think fair to say, generally higher than what you might get from a typical, private, application from outside the council. So I think it's looking positive on that front, definitely.
Okay, I can't hold you to it, but appreciate that. We should make it a policy, but there we are. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fussell. Councillor Mike Adams.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Justin. This is familiar to many members of the Regen and Housing Scrutiny Committee, because we had this presented to us a couple of weeks ago, and with many of the officers from the developers and the architects. And so thanks for going over that again. And yes, and as you just mentioned about the passive house and regeneration of the best kind of heating and water usage on the site is something that we need to make sure that all of that is held up to, and that we don't allow any slips away from the impressive presentation that we had then, and that we can walk on through that. So thanks very much, Justin.
Yeah, I don't see any more hands up at the moment. As a local member, I am aware from looking at the paperwork that we've received on this application that there have obviously been numerous concerns expressed by residents, but I think we as a planning committee can give those people assurance that this is only dealing with the principle of the site and not related to many of the concerns that the people have, which in many ways relates to layout, the loss of a mugger, which isn't going to be the case. There's already a reassurance that the mugger will be replaced within the community. So that's the main thing as a local member here. I don't know whether anybody else has got any comments to make. Oh yes, Councillor Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to echo Councillor Adams' point there. We had the benefit of a presentation on this a little while back at the committee. It really seems to me it's an extremely exciting development, and I think it's only going to be a positive move in terms of Oakdale. As a former resident of the community, I know what the village is like, and I can see this bringing further benefits. I think the design layout, the use of passive house designs and the whole notion of that have all been brought into play here. And it's going to look extremely exciting. I'd like to move officers' recommendations on this, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ridgewell. Would anybody like to second that?
Second.
Yeah, I'll back that up.
Okay,
second.
Councillor Adams. So it's been moved and seconded. There's been no further hands up, and I would just like again to reassure those people that have concerns about this site that there's going to be ample opportunity for those matters to be discussed and to be decided on at a later stage. Okay, so with no further hands up from members, then I'm going to move to the vote on this. The recommendation is for approval, for permission to be granted. So the voting slip is in front of you. It's obviously yes to approve, no against, or the third one to abstain, and then press the submit button.
Just going to check the vote now, Chair. Chair, the vote is in order. That's 13-4. That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. Right, we now then move on to agenda item 5, which is application number 21/1226. Again, an outline planning application at T. Darren Home for the elderly, Cromwell Road, Brisker. Again, the case officer is Justin Waite, and it's pages 37 to 62 of the report. Justin, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share the presentation again. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, it's there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, this is an outline plan application for residential development on the former T. K home site. In this situation, whilst it's outlined, there are some matters that are being considered at this stage, which are access and layout. The proposal itself is to residential development for over 55 supported housing apartments with community accommodation and other associated infrastructure that goes with that. The plan on the right-hand side of this slide shows the site outlined in red. Just for some context, you've got St. Mary Street just to the northeast of the site. You've got Ravenswood Court to the southeast of the site, and then to the southwest of the site, you've got Crescent Road residential properties here, and adjacent to the northwestern boundary of the site, you've got the existing healthcare buildings. So moving on to the site layout, as I said earlier, layout is being considered at this stage along with access. You'll see that the buildings themselves, there are 3 buildings on site. 2 of the buildings, you have the larger L-shaped building here, which is up to 4 stories in height. That will provide accommodation for residents. There is also a smaller rectangular shaped building here, which would be 3 stories in height, again providing residential accommodation. To more the rear of the site here, this is going to be the community type building. This is only 2 stories in height. So these 3 buildings largely enclose the community space there for the residents in the middle of the site. In addition, to the rear, you have some allotment gardens that are proposed. You'll see that the vehicular access into the site will come in off Ravenswood Court, and that will lead to a parking area for 19 car parking spaces. Sort of associated infrastructure like plant, refuse, and bike storage and buggy charging facilities, they will all be accommodated within this L-shaped building primarily itself. So that's the general layout. Or I should also add actually that on St Mary Street, there's an existing vehicular access that is actually proposed to be closed up to vehicles. And what you'll have on St Mary Street is pedestrian links and pedestrian accesses to are shown there onto that adjacent street. Again, because scale appearance are reserved for future consideration, this is just an indicative sketch showing the potential mass of the buildings. As you can see here, the larger L-shaped building, that will address both St Mary Street and Ravenswood Court. Again, they've just tried to indicate to you that this prominent corner section of the building will obviously look to have a landmark appearance to try and act as a key feature in such a prominent location, which is why it may be slightly higher than the other elements of the development. As I said, this other residential block that's up to 3 stories in height, and you can see here then the community building, which is obviously only 2 stories in height and lower. Again, you can see here the internal community space for the residents, and you can just pick up the allotment gardens to the rear there and the parking. Just to provide you with some context, this is looking in a southwestwards direction towards the site. In the foreground, you'll see the War Memorial. This is actually a listed building, along with the gates and railings here. These are all listed. You can see the existing building on site here. I should add that it is actually a day roost for pipistral bats. So the 3 derogation tests in relation to the habitats regulations have been applied in relation to this application and found to be acceptable. And Natural Resources Wales has also confirmed that, subject to the mitigation measures proposed in the ecological report submitted with the application, that the population of the bat here would not be unacceptably affected by the development. And obviously a bat licence will also be required in relation to the demolition of this building, which was considered separately under the prior notification process. Just to pick up some key issues with the development that were raised, I should add there's 2 trees here which are category A and 2 trees here which are category B. Now, they are proposed to be lost as a result of the development for 2 reasons, really. One is there's actually existing Welsh Water sewage infrastructure that sort of runs across the northwestern part of the site, which sterilises a large part of the site. And as a consequence, to make a more coherent and viable development, is proposed to redirect this infrastructure along the perimeter of the site to the front here and along Ravenswood Court to increase the developable area. But also, as a result of that, it will have an impact on the trees. And there's also a consideration in relation to the urban design benefits of having a prominent 4-story building located in this location, and how that relates then to the surrounding built environment. This is a view also just looking to the westwards, picks up the sort of other part of the site more to the north. Just to give you some more context, you can see the existing health centre buildings there, some trees here which will largely be retained as part of the proposed development, and you can just see Crescent Road properties there in the distance. This view picks up again on the corner. You can see the category A trees there, which are to be removed. Ravenswood Court, where the vehicle access will be from, and also obviously got St Mary Street, which runs along here to the front. And if you can imagine, this is where the prominent corner of the building would be, addressing both streets there. This just gives an indication of where the vehicle access will go into the site of Ravenswood Court, and just as an approximation, if you can imagine, just probably between this close board fence here and the existing building, that's where the vehicle access will go into the site itself. This view just picks up on some of the surrounding properties. You'll see residential properties of Ravenswood Court and Crescent Road there at the back. You'll note from the report that there are considered to be sufficient separation distances to these surrounding residential properties to safeguard any impact on residential amenity. So it's considered that there won't be any unacceptable impact on the residential amenity of these residents. But obviously, we'll still look at matters of scale and appearance in terms of fenestration, so on, and overlooking at reserved matter stage, but satisfied that the site can accommodate this development without causing harm to these properties. I should also perhaps indicate that I should have mentioned earlier, perhaps, that this site is located within a flood zone C1, which means the site is affected by flooding, but there is significant flood infrastructure in place. As a consequence, you have to apply the justification tests to see whether residential development is acceptable. Those tests were applied, and obviously the development was found to be acceptable and met those tests. And a flood consequence assessment was also submitted as part of the application. And the consequences of flooding have also been found to be acceptable, with no objection received from Natural Resources Wales in that regard. And then finally, this is just a view of the health centre buildings. Again, those were considered as part of the report, and the impact on those buildings was found to be acceptable. So just to summarise then, this is obviously a brownfield site which has previously had residential development on it. In principle, residential development is acceptable. The proposed development is also considered to be in accordance with all of the relevant development plan policies, along with national policies and guidance. And on page 51 of the report, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to a number of conditions. So I'll end my presentation there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
You're on mute, Roy.
Yeah, you're on mute.
On mute, Roy.
And I thought you were on mute. I thought I was talking to everybody at that point, but obviously I was talking to myself. Sorry about that. Right, Councillor Adams.
Okay, pretty much just to repeat how I introduced the last application. We saw a really, and I will say, impressive presentation again at the Regen and Housing scrutiny a couple of weeks ago, and we were lucky enough to see many more representations and artistic impressions of a site which I knew many years ago, visiting a relative. And yeah, I'm excited at the prospects of what this will become and what we'll offer to the people of Risca and much wider environs within Caerphilly altogether. So happy to, if nobody else wants to recommend and move the recommendation of officers, I'm more than pleased to do so.
Okay, thank you for that. Anybody wish to second it at this stage? I've got two other speakers.
I'll second, Chair.
Okay, it's been seconded. Fine, so we know where we are. Right, Councillor Nigel Dixon and Councillor John Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just observations, really. I'm really pleased that we're getting these sites finally into use. It's been many years that site has been empty down there. Not so long with Oakdale as the other site, the one down in Darren, but many years, and it's long overdue. And I hope that I see more brownfield sites coming into use, like the Bargoed Plateau and other areas. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be using these sites before we look at greenfield. So I'm always happy to support the use of brownfield. Just pity it's taken so long. But better late than never.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dix. Councillor Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to echo the sentiments of the previous two speakers, really. I mean, it's a really exciting development. As Mike said, we had the opportunity of having a longer, more extensive presentation, more than a nod to the arts and crafts movement, some open cloisters on it, all sorts of things, which I think are really going to make it a fabulous place to live. I think 2 or 3 people said we'll put our names down for it. But yeah, I just want to just reiterate what's been said so far. It's been an eyesore for too many years now. It's being developed in the most exciting way, and I'm delighted. Thanks, Chair.
If you are putting your name down, I think you're at the bottom of the long list, Councillor Ridgewell. Did I see any other hands? No, the only hand that's still up is Councillor Mike Adams, and if you're going to speak now, then that'll be the end of the debate, Councillor Adams. I don't think you are likely to have anything to add, so I can put this to the vote. Thank you for your presentation, Justin, and the voting slip can be put before us. So it'll be the recommendation that permission be granted subject to conditions, and the voting slip.
You're on mute again, Chair.
I don't know what's happening to my speaker here. It seems to be clicking on and off at will. I'm sorry about that. I did say yes for approval, no if you're against. And the voting slip is there. I'm ready when 13 responses are seen on the slip, so I don't think there's a problem here, Rebecca.
No, Chair, the vote is in order, that's correct. So 13 responses are for yes, that's unanimous.
Okay, so this has been granted subject to conditions. We're about to close the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. This is the last session. I don't know whether we'll be meeting each other again in a few months' time. We'll just have to wait and see. But in between, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. Enjoy your party, Roy.